to strengthen your nonprofit with HR volunteer support. I'm Josh from the Taproot Foundation. I'm very excited to talk about HR skilled volunteerism and pro bono with you all, what it is, what it looks like in practice, and how you can access it through our online platform. I can see a lot of people are popping in to our webinar now. I recognize some of these names. Good to see you again virtually, as it were. But I am just going to go ahead and get started by introducing our agenda for the day. Everything we're going to go over during this webinar. So first, I'll start with a short round of introductions from us at the Taproot team here, and then I'll ask you to make some introductions of yourselves down in the chat if you feel comfortable doing that. Then I'll just talk about Taproot. These webinars are a mix of people who might just be learning about Taproot for the first time. There are also a mix of people who maybe used Taproot services before, or maybe refreshing or familiar with what we do. So we try to pepper in enough for everyone to keep people's attention. Maybe if you already know one thing, you'll learn something new in another part of the presentation. But we always like to level set by just introducing who we are. And then I want to talk about the need for HR skilled volunteerism. And kind of focus in on a data point in particular and the kind of historical trajectory of HR skilled volunteerism, at least as we've seen it administered. Then we'll move into preparing to work with skilled volunteers, how you can assess your own needs to make sure an opportunity is actually a good fit for a skilled volunteer, whether it's an HR skilled volunteer or really any other. And then we'll talk about building HR capacity with skilled volunteers. So we'll get into the nitty gritty at that part. We'll talk about the actual examples of what HR projects look like and how you might be able to leverage them at your organization. We'll also link you up with some examples of nonprofits just like yours that have used HR support from skilled volunteers and how they used it. We'll actually direct you to some really cool case studies that are up on our website. So if you really want to, after this, get a better idea of what this really looks like and be inspired to see the other work that nonprofits like yours have done in this space, you can check those out as well. Then I'll touch on how to access support for skilled volunteers through our online marketplace. Again, that might be a retread for some of you because I know from some of the names here that many of you are already active there. But I want to make sure people who maybe don't know a lot about it, but are excited to potentially engage with an HR volunteer, know how to go through that process. And then there'll be a Q&A. So if your question, isn't answered throughout the duration of the presentation, please drop it in the Q&A chat. And we will try and answer your question live. We are also going to send you a follow-up with the recording of this presentation. So you will have that as well. If you couldn't be here with us right now live, hi. But we're glad you could watch it anyway. And there'll be ways to get in contact with us after the presentation is over, of course, in that follow-up email. So without further ado, quick round of introductions. Like I said, my name's Josh. My official title here is Nonprofit Success Coach. And I work as a frontline resource with a lot of nonprofits who are interested in learning more about skilled volunteerism and Taproot, and in particular, our online marketplace. I am going to bounce things over to my colleague, Kristen, who is here with us today from the marketing department, who is helping present. Hi, Kristen.
Hi, Josh. Hi, everyone. So I'm Kristen, and I'm in the marketing and communications team here at Taproot. But today I'll be in the chat as you're commenting and sharing. And if you have any questions, I'll be there to interact with you all. So as Josh said, feel free to introduce yourselves, your organization, and where you're joining from today.
Thanks, Kristen. So obviously we have a lot of people on, we're getting up to close to 50 people here. So we can't let everyone come off mute and introduce themselves. But if you feel comfortable, we'd love to see in the chat, your name, where you're located, and what your nonprofit is. If you want to drop your LinkedIn or your website, give us the mission and vision of your nonprofit and any other information. Um, these chat boxes at these events can actually be great networking opportunities. Maybe you see another nonprofit that maybe works in the cause area that you do. Maybe there's other people in this space that you're interested in reaching out to. So at the very least, you can talk to each other. But please introduce yourselves in the chat as well, if you would like. We'd love to hear about what you all are doing in the world, obviously. Um, so I'm going to just move on for the people who might be brand spanking new to Taproot. Some of you have obviously heard this before, but if you're unfamiliar with Taproot, I just want to lay the groundwork for kind of what we do and who we are. So Taproot was founded as a nonprofit ourselves. We are a 501c3 nonprofit foundation. So we are also a nonprofit. We were founded in 2001 with the knowledge that there is a massive resource gap present in the social sector, and organizations who may well have the solutions to our world's most pressing social challenges simply don't have the financial means or staff capacity to carry out their missions to their fullest extent. So, kind of at our core, we empower mission-driven organizations by mobilizing skilled volunteers to advance resource equity. That is our mission statement and what we seek to do in the world. I also want to just clarify, what is skills-based volunteering? This is how Taproot achieves its mission. We lead and inspire and facilitate skills-based volunteering from people in the business world who want to donate their skill sets back to nonprofits like yours. So skills-based volunteering is simply a donation of one's abilities, talents, networks, and resources to nonprofits, obviously on a pro bono basis. You'll hear us kind of interchangeably refer to this as skilled volunteering or even pro bono consulting, in some cases. So pro bono consultants, skilled volunteers, we are kind of talking about the same thing there. It's just kind of a different name. Both nonprofits and volunteers, I think, can benefit greatly from skills-based volunteering. Obviously, for nonprofits, you're adding capacity. We are often working with small organizations. Maybe some of our staffs are just volunteers. Maybe you're just getting up off the ground and you have like a governing board and that's it. And they're kind of wearing a bunch of different hats. Or the executive director is also the head of HR. Sound familiar? Again, we are a nonprofit ourselves, so we understand a lot of those challenges. It can also help give a nonprofit a sounding board to fill to fill skill gaps at their organization. But obviously, it's going to help you build infrastructure at your organization to better make good on your mission. And it gives you more time and tools to do what you're uniquely great at if you use skilled volunteering support. It also helps build community. So oftentimes, you can build lasting connections that go beyond that initial partnership or project you work on. You gain new advocates, donors, and board members, or even staff members from engaging in skilled volunteerism. There are a lot of skilled volunteers that end up loving the nonprofit they've worked with so much that they end up joining their board or something like that. We love to hear when that happens. So pro bono or skills-based volunteering can be a good gateway into building a larger network. Maybe you're getting skilled volunteer assistance from someone who works at a company. You might want to hit up for a partnership to enhance your fundraising. That's a great in, for example. So there is a community building and networking aspect to this as well. And obviously the overall impact to your bottom line. Nonprofits are operating on a limited budget, obviously. Times are tough, and we're operating in a field of scarcity. Sometimes, even in funding operations themselves, you can enhance your own impact. Meaning, you engage in skilled volunteers to help in various fundraising efforts that you might be interested in engaging on. And, not all nonprofits have the ability to bring in paid consultants who, would otherwise build capacity at the organization. Um, and so it makes the impact on your nonprofit's bottom line very financially valuable to bring in motivated, skilled volunteers um, who are, interested in helping your organization on a pro bono basis. And this is just a smattering of kind of our impact over the years. So since the early 2000s, we've partnered with over 10,000 social change organizations and 24,000 volunteers, totaling over $300 million in donated professional services. We forge dozens of pro bono connections every week through Taproot Plus, which is our free to use volunteer nonprofit matchmaking platform. Again, I'll talk about how you can potentially use that later in the presentation. Our nonprofit has also partnered with over 100 Fortune 500 companies through our advisory services practice, which is kind of our in-house consultancy, which brings corporate employee talent directly to nonprofits across Taproot's network. So through this online platform, we've worked to lower barriers for entry for organizations just starting out. It also means that if you join, you're in our network. So if there's ever an opportunity for you to potentially engage on or be invited to one of those events or engagements that is facilitated by our advisory services practice, you could potentially be tapped to do that as long as you're in our network. So keep that in mind as well. If you're not necessarily thinking about going into posting projects or opportunities immediately, you might want to go ahead and just create a presence, because it means once you're in our network, you might get requests for RFPs or invites to special events where you can link up with skilled volunteers on a team basis, or for speed consulting or pro bono marathon events, things like that. Everything that we do, that's kind of our bread and butter to better link up nonprofits like yours with support from the world of business consulting. So now I want to touch on the need for HR skill volunteerism in particular. And the reason I like to do that is because, believe it or not, HR skill volunteerism is actually one of the more underutilized types of skill volunteerism. So many nonprofits feel understandably very nervous about bringing in an HR consultant to work with the organization because issues that might arise cut deep to the very heart and soul of your organization. And that's precisely why I encourage you to start thinking about your own HR presence. So even if you're a small organization, it's good to kind of start thinking about this, because while HR-based projects can be daunting, they can also be very high impact for the exact same reason they're daunting, right? So an organization is only as good as its people. And this is true especially in the world of nonprofits, I think, where we are mission-driven, cause-driven people, right? So we were really encouraged to see that on our latest nonprofit resiliency survey conducted just at the end of last year, that 31% of the respondents, a healthy chunk, indicated that they did have a need for HR or leadership development capacity building support. So a lot of nonprofits know that this is a critical category of need, but they might not be sure of where to start or what types of projects their organization could really benefit from. And I'll link you up with some great examples of what HR support from skilled volunteers can look like, and show you some case studies for what it looks like in practice from nonprofits like yours a little bit later in the presentation here. But first, for those of you who might be new to thinking about skill volunteerism, I want to go over how to properly vet your own HR needs to determine if they would be a good option for pro bono support, for the support of a skilled volunteer. So it's important to note that not all the potential projects that you might have on your list are great candidates for skilled volunteerism. And we want to arm you with the knowledge to that knowledge to make sure that you can make that determination before you start advertising potential projects for skill volunteers to jump on, whether it's through a Taproot based program or really anywhere else. So if you're getting skill volunteers and anywhere else, we think that these 4 basic tests that you can put your needs through are really, really going to kind of resonate, whether it's a Taproot program or not. So you want to start thinking about your needs in this kind of systematic way and kind of start vetting them for kind of each one of these tests that we like to put our needs through. So throughout Taproot's years of experience facilitating pro bono projects, we've noticed that there are just certain basic qualities that all successful pro bono engagements share. And we've taken these qualities and we turn them into 4 simple screening tests that you can use to evaluate every prospective need for a pro bono opportunity. And I'll go over these kind of quickly in succession here. And again, we're going to send out a copy of this presentation. So you don't have to vigorously jot down any notes or anything like that. You'll have this under your belt if you want to come back to it. The first test we recommend when you're vetting your needs is the scoping test. And here you're really trying to determine how big your project actually is. And how well defined is the actual end product that you want out of this project. Making sure that you can very clearly and concretely state the end goal of the project in a succinct and detailed way is very, very important. So it's not enough to just come in and say, well, we need help with HR. Okay, well, that could mean hundreds of different things. Get much more specific than that. What exactly hurts, right? What problems do you have, and what are the potential projects that you could engage on to solve them, to help solve them? A good way to think about scope is by breaking your needs down by the core skill set required. So a revamp of your employee handbook, for example, to make it very topical for HR, sounds like one single project on its own, because it's obviously one kind of discrete final deliverable. Well, when you start thinking about it, there is more than one skill set that you might need to tap into, which probably means that more than one project with more than one skilled volunteer is going to need to take place. You might tap one skill volunteer to advise on content. Someone who's very proficient in HR operations, who can help make sure your handbook is up to date with the latest best practices, making sure it's comprehensive and understandable for new employees. But maybe you also say, hey, we really want our new handbook to really pop, and the design of the old handbook, the content's out of date. We're getting that handled by an HR volunteer, but the look and feel of it's also pretty out of date. So this is going to be maybe one of your premier onboarding resources. So you might want to tap the skills of a graphic designer in a separate project to get busy in Canva or Adobe or something like that to make your handbook really visually appealing. And this is the first thing a new team member at your organization might get. So just kind of thinking through the different skill sets that actually go into creating a final product, then you realize we might have kind of 2 separate projects here. So that's how you want to start thinking about scope. The next test is also very important. It's the urgency test. Meaning if the need is urgent, i.e. maybe very bad things are going to happen as a direct result of this project not happening, and maybe the deadline is coming up really quick, like in 2 weeks or something like that. We actually recommend not using skill volunteerism or pro bono resources to fill those types of needs. You want to cultivate every avenue of support possible. Because you'll want to keep in mind that skilled volunteering projects generally take place on an extended timeline. This is kind of one of the trade-offs of skill volunteerism, is obviously we love it because it's pro bono, it's for free. But most people who are doing skilled volunteer work are doing that work after hours or on the weekends, potentially. They have their own 9-to-5s in a lot of cases. And this can necessarily extend timelines for communication and things like that. So if your need is like a flashing red light or a 5-alarm fire or something like that, it's probably not a good fit for skilled volunteerism. So go ahead and cross that one off your list. If your timeline is a bit more flexible, and you could be a little more expansive, then it would probably pass this urgency test. So keep your timeline in mind. Um, the third test is the knowledge transfer test. So here you're going to ask, are you confident that you and fellow team members can and will transfer the information and materials to the volunteer that they need to complete this project successfully? Um, and in particular, how might this play out in a remote environment? Most skill volunteering engagements are taking place in a remote or virtual space. So I really want to lean into this one because it is very important for HR based needs in particular. Usually, an HR consultant is going to need a lot of exposure to your organization's internal structure and workplace culture to design a solution that really works for your organization. Um, so, onboarding them and supplying them with the necessary information is going to be really, really critical. And in the next section of this presentation, where I give examples of kind of what these projects in the HR space look like, I'm actually going to call out the knowledge transfer necessary for each of those types of projects directly to give you an idea of what it actually looks like in practice. And if you're looking at, that knowledge transfer list and you're interested in one of those projects and you realize, oh, well, we don't have all of that stuff that's necessary in the knowledge transfer, then you might realize, oh, we actually have a completely different set of projects that we initially, different than what we initially thought. And then finally, the fourth test is staff and board readiness. So this is where you're going to ask yourself, does your organization really want or need this? Or is it just you that wants this? This is really important because several people from your organization may need to be involved in this project to make it a success. If you as an executive director really want to update your staff handbook, but your board chair doesn't think it's a priority right now, that's probably a red flag. So choose to invest time planning for and managing pro bono that has buy-in from around your organization. So those are the four basic tests that you should use to vet every potential need, whether it be an HR need or really any other type of need. But again, keeping in mind that knowledge transfer test, very important for HR projects in particular. So now comes the fun part. I've talked a lot about the importance of HR and how you can vet your own HR needs to see if they make a good fit for skilled volunteerism. But what does this actually look like in practice? So in this section, I'm going to go over some examples of HR-based projects and how certain organizations have used them in the past to show how all of this can come together and how organizations are actually using HR skilled volunteerism. Along the way, I'm also just going to pepper in some general tips for how you can integrate project planning best practices into your engagements with skilled volunteers as you move forward. So I'll be peppering those in along the way. Those can apply really to any project, but sometimes, they might be more salient for certain projects versus others. So the first example of a really great intro type of HR project is an HR assessment and recommendations project. So through this type of project, you can build resiliency by assessing where your organization stands internally, brainstorming on how to improve upon weaknesses, and leaning into organizational strengths. Investigating which HR policies should be implemented, researching new remote work standards, or conducting an internal engagement survey can all be elements of the work that happens in this kind of project. If your organization has had to reduce its size or maybe on the better end of things there, or rapidly expand, a good problem to have. You can use an assessment tool like this to get a better understanding of how to operate with a scaled back team or with a team that is rapidly expanding, which is probably what we want a little more. This type of skill volunteerism is very similar to an audit, but instead of directly solving problems, HR audits, like financial audits, help in providing insights into possible causes for current and future problems. So the learnings and recommendations you receive from the assessment can and should be a building block for many other HR recruitment or staff development related initiatives you might have. A great thing to keep in mind is the HR assessment and recommendations project is actually what we call a pre-scoped project on our online marketplace on Taproot Plus, making it really easy to request volunteer support in this area. And I'll share a little bit more about pre-scoped projects later on in the presentation. But basically, it's a project that has already some boilerplate language associated with it that you can just select and drop down into your project description to kind of relieve the burden of having to come up with your own project description. A great tip, that I have at this point is you want to be very, very clear with your volunteer and internal team about what is and what is not in scope for all projects, but HR projects in particular. Will this project just cover fact finding, or will it involve making quick fix recommendations? Will you be handling the implementation in house? Be as crystal clear as possible about contingencies like that. So you see here, I've listed out the knowledge transfer that would be needed to do this kind of project. And then there's some other related projects here that I won't jump into as in much depth as this one. But you can look at those too, and those might spark your interest as well as potential projects that might help build your HR capacity at your organization. So the second project I want to talk about is a performance management process project. By leading mission-driven organizations, you all already have a few things going in your favor. So your employees' work is driven by something greater than themselves. Every day, the office is rooted in doing good. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't take the time and make the investment in strategies or educational resources that will engage and develop your team members. So you could potentially team up with an experienced HR volunteer to build a system to manage, retain, and develop team members, or even your program participants. And a strong performance management system is something that is really going to increase staff satisfaction and effectiveness while improving your nonprofit's ability to fulfill its mission. So the right system helps leadership and managers clarify the competencies and objectives of individual employees, align them with organizational goals, and sets up a process to provide regular feedback. So another tip I give for your performance management process project is that if your organization is an organization that might be completely volunteer run, consider diving first into a board effectiveness audit instead to measure your board's capacity and performance and to identify areas for growth. So, not everyone is ready for a performance management process project at this point, but there are other projects that are related that you could potentially jump into. And again, you'll see this critical knowledge transfer points here for a type of performance management process project that you'll need to make sure you're communicating to your selected skilled volunteer, whoever you team up with. And now I want to pause before jumping into a few more examples to kind of show you what this really looks like in practice. An example from a nonprofit much like yours. So this is a nonprofit named Chicago Family Health Center. And Chicago Family Health Center changes the lives of Southside Chicago residents by providing access to critical dental, behavioral, and medical health services. They initially reached out for pro bono support from Taproot because they needed to take serious action to reduce their staff turnover. And they ended up working with multiple skilled volunteers with the goal of building up their workforce through fresh HR techniques and policies. And there's this wonderful quote from Stephanie here, who's the Chief Officer of Planning Strategy Development at this organization, where she says, our amazing skilled volunteers helped us develop strong human resources processes for recruitment, onboarding, and retention. Our HR capacity has truly been transformed because of the service we received. And then there's this very interesting stat. 2 years ago, our employee turnover rate was 48%. Today, it's 24%. So that's a massive improvement from where they were just 2 years ago. That just kind of shows you the type of impact that HR projects can make. And we'll actually drop a link to this case study that Chicago Family Health Center has helped us create about the various projects that they use to enhance their HR capacity. We'll drop those links here, but they're also going to be in the follow-up email as well if you want to read a little bit more about this. And you can see that the projects they used were an HR assessment and a recruitment and retention strategy project, to name the two specifically that went into kind of that overall goal of reducing that staff turnover rate at the organization. So now I want to get back to some more examples. The next example is a leadership coaching project. This can really be a great one for smaller organizations. So change, whether driven by internal or external conditions, can be really challenging for an organization. You can prepare your staff, however, and board members for managing effectively in difficult situations by investing in their professional development. So you could consult with coaches skilled in areas such as change management, remote work oversight, if you're managing a remote team, building or maintaining organizational culture, and more. So this project develops strategies and processes to support the successful implementation of change using skills training, leadership coaching, and culture adjustment. So leadership coaching doesn't have to be just for your organization's founder or executive director. You could also consider leveraging this as a powerful professional development resource for rising staff members. This can also be a great way to retain your staff members by giving them kind of this coaching support as well. Another tip I'll give here, when you're thinking about these kind of projects, is setting really clear expectations for communications is vital for all projects when you've selected a volunteer and you're work with them. But it's really vital for HR related projects because of this heavy knowledge transfer element. And establishing communications preferences at the outset, is going to be really helpful. You'll want to also make sure to speak candidly and discuss how you'll get and receive feedback so you can avoid bumps in the road. So not just your communications preferences, how you want to communicate, but discussing how you want to process, give and receive feedback about what you're both doing together. And then I want to talk a little bit about the employee handbook project. This can be a really great starter project for a new organization in particular. So if you have more than a few employees, it's a good idea to create an employee handbook that clearly explains your workplace policies. The benefits of having an employee handbook are multifarious, right? But some of them are, every employee receives the same information about the rules of your workplace. Your employees will know what you expect from them and what they can expect from you. And you'll buy yourself valuable legal protection if there ever arises a conflict, that has to be settled through mediation or something like that. So if you are a volunteer-run organization or do a lot of work with hands-on volunteers, you could also consider creating a volunteer handbook that sets a set of similar expectations if you're kind of using an all-volunteer workforce. Another tip I'll give at this point is if you see anything on this knowledge transfer list that your organization hasn't created yet, you'll probably want to start there first. So each of these bullets in the knowledge transfer section here could be its own discrete scoped out project in and of itself in a lot of ways. So that's the other recommendation I'll give is, if you're looking at the knowledge transfer and you don't have all of this ready to go to tackle an employee handbook, you might want to start with one of these things first to tackle as its own need. And again, I want to show kind of what this looks like in practice with another example from one of our nonprofit beneficiaries. So this is from an organization called Perscolas. And Perscolas was founded over 25 years ago with a mission to open doors to transformative technology careers for people in communities often underrepresented in tech. Um, and skilled volunteerism has been a part of Perscolas's growth over time. So both in their programmatic work and also in their investment in their staff. So over their years of working with Taproot, they have worked with HR professionals to conduct an analysis of the benefits package they offer to staff members, development of their employee handbook, and the creation of a staff compensation plan. So you can see from Damien's quote here, while you're in an organization, you can say something until you're blue in the face. But if you have an external subject matter expert come in, it will help move things along. Pro bono helps remove barriers, provide rationale, as well as actionable information that your team can use in real time. So I really love that quote. And we've done a lot of work with Perscolas throughout the years. And again, we'll include we'll drop a link to a case study from Perscolas that you can again read on your own time if you're really interested in looking a little more in depth about what they did with their pro bono support. We'll drop that link and also include it in the email as well as a follow-up item. So I hope that gave you all some kind of concrete examples of the types of skilled volunteering in the HR space that you could use at your organization that could benefit your organization. But I also just wanted to give you a kind of a broader menu because the projects I went over a little more in depth are by no means the only projects that you can potentially work on with an HR volunteer. So you'll see a list of projects here that are all the different types of HR skill volunteering opportunities you could engage on. Everything from board effectiveness, which measures a nonprofit's board capacity and performance. It typically looks at the board's governance practices, stewardship, membership, resource generation, and CEO management to help guide on how the board can and best help the nonprofit it serves. I like to call that one out, along with the internal or interview process assessment and recommendations. Oftentimes the hiring process, especially if you've never done it before, can be very, very daunting. It can help to bring in a pro to take a look at the way you structure the interview process, the assignments or work examples that you request during the interview process when you're vetting candidates, your interview methods, phone calls, virtual meetings, in person, etc. And the candidate review process that takes place to pinpoint areas where bias could be impacting your hiring practices and make recommendations on how to ensure a more equitable interview process while identifying the strongest potential candidates. So that's just a few extra types of projects that we wanted to kind of give you a menu of, to give you just a broader view of all the types of projects you could use at your organization that could enhance your HR capacity. And now I want to I've gone over some kind of broad, high level tips, about thinking about pro bono projects, but I do want to jump into more specifically tips for working with HR volunteers in particular. So I want to start with a quote from a man named Joseph Dugan, who's actually a founder of a nonprofit called Post-Colonial Networks and Borderless Press. And he has a great quote that he gave us a while back where he says, take the time to work with your volunteers, invest in developing a relationship with them, and give them opportunities to get to know your organization, your team, and your founder. And I think that really sums up, in particular for HR volunteers, how hands-on you want to be kind of in onboarding them and getting them familiar with your nonprofit. So create space for them to get to know you, your team, and your mission. Give them windows into your organization's culture and let them see your values play out in everyday settings. This is going to better inform their work. Remain open to feedback. HR, board, and coaching work can be some of the most delicate projects you enter into as nonprofit leaders. This could be obviously the reasons why HR pro bono has historically been the most underutilized type of pro bono for nonprofits. You may hear really hard feedback and truths about your organization and where it needs to improve, but it also has the power to be some of the most impactful types of feedback. So I want you to lean into the uncomfortable nature of HR projects by remaining open and honest about that feedback. You also want to keep in mind it's not you versus the volunteer and what they're uncovering or recommending. It's you both as a team versus the problem, which is a really good way to think about voicing feedback. You'll want to be extremely honest about whether your project is going in the right direction or not. So voice feedback early and often. Again, to that communications piece, establishing how you're going to give and receive feedback is very important. And that should go both ways. It's helpful to clarify that, that you're both leaders in that feedback space. You want to be realistic about what your organization is ready to take on and actually implement. So going back to that, one of those tests, that board and staff readiness test is going to be pretty key. Do you have the buy-in to make this investment truly worth diving into? Ask along the way, what about this could have been improved? It's good to think about when you're doing a pro bono engagement, the debrief, especially if you're doing your first pro bono engagement. What went well, what didn't go well? You'll want to ask throughout the entire process, what could have been improved about interviewing volunteer candidates for this pro bono project. As you onboard a skilled volunteer consultant to the project, what went well, what didn't go well. As you're providing feedback during the project, what went well, what didn't go well. As you're wrapping up the project, HR professionals are primed and ready to share great insights with you on where communication could be improved or where your overall process could have been improved. So debriefing and taking stock of how the project went is good project management. And I think it'll be very, very helpful when you're doing HR projects to lay that groundwork as well, to get into the habit of doing a debrief about what worked and didn't work throughout the whole process. So now that I've talked about HR volunteerism and best practices for vetting your own needs and what kind of capacity building support you can get with HR volunteers, let's talk about how you can actually access support from skilled volunteers. So for many of you here, this might be kind of old information, since I know many of you are already users of the Taproot Plus marketplace. But for the people here who might be newer, I do kind of want to introduce where you can go to start using our services. So recently, we've actually merged our foundation main page, taprootfoundation.org, and taprootplus.org into a more streamlined website where everything is more centralized. So things look a little bit different, but you can still get everything done right here. You're still kind of in the same place. We've just kind of changed how things look during one of our most recent updates. So there's no going to two different websites, Taproot Foundation versus Taproot Plus. We've kind of centralized them into one experience here. So you can use that login or get started button at the upper right-hand corner. I also just want to show you that we have a new feature called the Pro Bono menu. And you can click on any of these sets of skill categories here and kind of see different options for pro bono projects that you could potentially engage in with a skilled volunteer that could help you meet needs in those categories. So we kind of have a slate of all sorts of different projects and resources that go along with those types of categories of skill sets. So if you're still wondering, okay, what are the types of projects I can get done with the help of a skilled volunteer, this pro bono menu is actually a really great place to start. And obviously, down here, second in the first column is HR leadership development. So you might want to make use of that while you're looking at the site. If you want to sign up, it's very, very similar to the sign up process for any other services you might have signed up for that are matchmaking services. If you are a nonprofit and you're based in the United States, we will need your EIN or fiscal sponsorship information. So we do allow nonprofits who are fiscally sponsored to use Taproot Plus as well. You have to be fiscally sponsored by a 501c3 nonprofit foundation. And you'll have to have a written attestation of that fiscal sponsorship. We do require nonprofits in the United States to either be a 501c3 nonprofit themselves or have fiscal sponsorship. We are, however, available for nonprofits in other countries, certain select countries, the United Kingdom, all European Union countries, along with Canada and India as well. And we make determinations for those nonprofits on a case-by-case basis, kind of cross-referencing the various databases that those jurisdictions use to confirm nonprofits in terms of their actual status as a nonprofit or publicly registered charity. Every jurisdiction kind of does something different. Not everyone has the IRS, obviously. So you can sign up there, and that's kind of what it looks like. And there are really two different kind of avenues of support you can tap into on Taproot Plus. You'll notice you can tap into a multi-week engagement. So most of the opportunities I've been talking about in this presentation are multi-week engagements, what we call projects, where you're working with a skilled volunteer over a period of weeks to achieve a deliverable together, a final finished product. But you also have access to a feature we call sessions, which are 1 hour, one-off consultations. These are really great for diagnosing, brainstorming, even troubleshooting, or just picking the brain of a subject matter expert. You want to be very careful, though, because sometimes people post sessions that are probably much better projects. If you're asking someone to build a wireframe for your new website, that's definitely going to be a project. That's going to take a lot longer than just an hour of time. So if you're interested in an hour-long consultation, you want to keep it really, really tightly focused. That hour can go by really quickly. So if you have like a concrete kind of finished product that you're working towards, rather than just wanting advice or diagnosing or troubleshooting or brainstorming support, you'll want to go with that project option. Again, this is kind of what the project posting page looks like when you access your dashboard. So when you do post a project, we're going to ask you a series of questions about it. And that's going to be your project pitch that we're going to take to the marketplace and advertise to skilled volunteers. So you can always go up to the Browse Opportunities button at the top of your dashboard to see actually what the marketplace looks like and what other nonprofits have posted to the marketplace. So it is a public marketplace. And once your project or session goes up on the marketplace, we are going to start boosting it out to skilled volunteers in our pool to try and get them interested in applying to your session or your project. If you do get someone applying that expresses interest, we're going to email you and tell you, hey, someone has expressed interest in your project or session. So again, if you get an interest in your session, you can review their statement of interest and their attached LinkedIn information. And if you want to hear what they have to say, you can match with them to have the call. And it's always good practice to try and prepare your thoughts before that call. You'll also be linked up with their email information. So if you want to send them any information before that call, you could do it. The Taproot Plus system will help you confirm a time for the call with that skilled volunteer and link you up again with their email information and a conference line that you can use. But if you want to contact them and use a different conference line, we're not going to be offended if you want to do that. But we do include one kind of just as a complimentary conference line, so you both have a neutral place to log into when your call time comes up. In terms of multi-week projects, when you get an application, you'll want to obviously make sure your timeline aligns with their availability. They're going to send you a statement of interest and a list of times that they'll be available to talk about the project. And this is just a really good time for you to both basically interview each other. They're going to assess, if they're a good match for your organization's needs, and particularly your organization's culture. They're going to want to get more information about the deliverable. They also might provide you some expert feedback on your deliverable and what direction they think the project should go in. You're also vetting them to get a better sense of their skills, experience, and whether or not they'd be a really good culture fit for your organization. So the process is a bit different for these multi-week projects. You'll potentially have the advantage of interviewing multiple candidates for a potential project, depending on how many candidates you get that come in. So whenever a new candidate applies for your project, we are going to reach out to you via email and let you know about it and kind of redirect you back to the site. So once you post a project, that is kind of a snapshot of what happens next in the process. Ideally, you'll find someone who you hit it off with, and then you can match with them on the project, and then you can begin working on that project together. So Taproot Plus is a really great matchmaking platform. We're here to kind of let you tap into our pool of skilled volunteers. Obviously, if I had my way, we'd be able to guarantee 100% that everyone would be matched with a skilled volunteer who posts an opportunity on Taproot Plus. We're not quite there yet, but we do our best to boost these opportunities out to skilled volunteers in our pool. But I always recommend to nonprofits to cultivate every avenue of support that might be available to you. Not just Taproot Plus, but other networks as well. But also make sure Taproot Plus is in your arsenal of resources that you're using to find skilled volunteer support. And really, that brings me to kind of the final part of our presentation here, where I get into when I get into the Q&A here. So I am trying to bring up the Q&A slide, but having a little trouble moving it forward. But no matter. So now, thank you, Kristen. Now that we're at the Q&A endpoint, Kristen's gonna send me over some questions that might have came in during your presentation. If you have any more questions that were answered during the presentation, go ahead and drop them in the chat here. Again, there will be opportunities to get in contact with us after the presentation. So if you're like me and you think of like really great questions, like way later after it's all over, and you're like, oh no, I should have asked that, you can get back in touch with us. Or if you want to really discuss, project posting and scoping in depth, you can also get in contact with me, and we can set up maybe a time to talk one-on-one to do that a little more in depth as well. So Kristen's boosted some good questions over to me that I want to jump into. Someone said that they're not yet registered as a nonprofit, and so can they still apply for a skilled volunteer to help? So right now, if you're in the United States, we do require that 501c3. If you can find another 501c3 who will fiscally sponsor you, that could be an option to go with if you're still getting up off the ground as a nonprofit. That does open some doors. So right now, those are still our requirements for in the United States. We also are available to public institutions. So I'm thinking like a local library or school or something like that. That's a publicly funded program is available. Taproot Plus is available there as well. So that's our baseline eligibility. We can't waive those requirements, unfortunately. But if you can find someone to be a fiscal sponsor, it's kind of a good halfway point for nonprofits that are still waiting on their 501c3 status to come in. There's another great question where someone says their employees are all volunteers, which is not uncommon at nonprofits, so you're definitely not alone there. uh, do we have examples of a handbook that pertains to an all volunteer organization? Not right off the bat do I have any examples of what that employee handbook or volunteer handbook would look out. But as I kind of went over during the presentation, that's potentially a really, really great project, is structuring a volunteer handbook for an all volunteer organization, or an employee handbook for employees who are all pro bono, who are all volunteers themselves, right? We do have people with volunteer management expertise in our pool, who can help you tailor a unique handbook that is for a staff that is mostly volunteers. There's another great question that they have a committee made up of 10 staff members. And should they document their hours of volunteers? Well, I think with this question, this really kind of depends on what you're documenting those hours for. So if I'm reading this correctly, if those staff members are actually paid staff members, on the committee, then you probably wouldn't, log them as volunteers. But this is like the type of question that is kind of highly dependent on your organization. So it's probably better pitched to someone, with I can speak kind of about HR pro bono, but I'm not necessarily an HR expert in and of myself. So whether or not those hours should be documented as volunteer hours or not isn't something I could potentially answer without like kind of getting into the nitty gritty of like your situation at your organization directly. If you're talking about as far as Taproot Plus, then no. Simply because, what's only good, the engagements that are going to be documented on Taproot Plus are only engagements that you've posted and are sourcing skill volunteers for, kind of in our pool of consultants who do skill volunteerism. So, your own employees acting in a volunteer capacity isn't necessarily something that you would need to use Taproot Plus for, if that's what you're getting at. Can you help develop policies and procedures? Well, yes, that is exactly the type of project that you could potentially, post for, depending on how far along you are in your journey, developing your HR presence. Again, that HR assessment and recommendations project is a really, really good place to start. If you have enough staff members to kind of make good on that type of project. Another great question: do you have pro bono legal review of employee handbooks? So right now, legal pro bono is actually an area of skill volunteerism that we do not facilitate any work in. The reason for that is we think our partners in the legal field already do pro bono very well. So we don't facilitate any legal pro bono requests. You could create an employee handbook with skill volunteer support, but if you wanted someone to look at it from a legal standpoint, like an attorney or someone who is licensed to do so, that's not the type of pro bono request we usually field. However, we do have partners in the legal field we can refer you to, in particular trust law from the Thomson Reuters Foundation is a really, really great partner. So if you haven't heard about trust law, I recommend Googling them if you are a nonprofit looking for legal pro bono assistance. They're a great partner to go to. Another great question of do Taproot volunteers use AI? This person was surprised to learn that a prior consultant, not through Taproot engagement but from somewhere else, was using AI on a project for the organization without clearing it with them. So this would be something that you would determine with your selected skill volunteer, whether or not you were comfortable with them using AI on the work they're doing. Going back to some of those best practices I was talking about creating very clear lines of communication and setting expectations. If this is something you feel very strongly about, that you don't want to be a part of the work, that's probably something you're going to want to think about when you're assessing and interviewing potential skill volunteers, is making sure, what their stance on using AI as part of the work is, and making it clear that, that's not something you want to use as part of the work that you're doing, or maybe it is. That's also an option that's available to you. But that would be something that you would clear kind of together, whether you wanted to use AI or not with a prospective volunteer. So that's an example of a type of expectation setting, that's really important at the top of the project. So when you and a skilled volunteer do match up, you have a lot of autonomy over how you want to manage the project. So Taproot is kind of here to help sourcing, but you and your selected volunteer have control over really kind of the project itself. You're both kind of the CEO of the project. Yeah, and we have another great question. Do we provide support in helping to scope and post the project? Yes. So if you want to get in touch with me, that's an example of something I do, actually. So you can reach out based off the follow-up email that Kristen's going to send out, or you can reach out to me directly here. And I will shoot you a link to get you scheduled. I do a lot of 30-minute one-on-ones for people who might have questions about project scoping, or how to answer the questions on our project description page when you're making the pitch. So I'd be more than happy to block off a time in the near future to discuss that with you in a little more depth. That's exactly what I do. And it looks like that is all the questions that have come in. And I know we've hit right at the top of the hour, and I want to respect everyone's time. But thank you all so much for being here today, and being such a captive audience. I hope you were able to learn a little bit more, especially about HR, pro bono assistance, and skill volunteerism. And we really hope to see you online, as we like to say, requesting HR skill volunteer support, or at least getting to think about it. But for now, I hope I can see you all again at some point. But I will let you get back to your Tuesdays, and have a good week. Thank you all. Have a good one.